Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're grabbing our magnifying glasses, putting on our detective hats, and cracking open an illustrated book of bad arguments. We're about to investigate the crime scene of faulty logic.
And this book, by Ali Al-Masawi, is basically our field guide. It's written for absolutely anyone who wants to get a better handle on arguments, and it does it with these really simple, super memorable drawings and examples.
You know that feeling, right? You're scrolling through a comment section online, and it just feels like the whole conversation is completely broken, that it's just not going anywhere? Well, you're definitely not alone. We're going to dig into exactly why so many of these discussions feel so pointless by learning to spot the hidden traps in how people reason.
Okay, let's just dive right in by setting the scene. Because, let's be honest, we live in a world that's pretty much a minefield of misleading arguments.
Think about it. From ads on TV to big political debates, so many of the arguments we hear are really just built to make us feel a certain way, to sway our opinion, not necessarily to get us any closer to the truth. So the whole point of this explainer is to give you a kind of toolkit for spotting these things, to help you think with a little more clarity and, hopefully, a lot more confidence.
So, let's get a little more formal here and actually define our mission and the key concept we're really going to be digging into today.
So, what in the world is a logical fallacy? Well, you can think of it like a crack in the foundation of an argument. The facts themselves, the bricks, they might actually be true, but the way they're put together, the structure, is flawed. So the whole thing just doesn't hold up. It's an error in reasoning, not necessarily an error in facts. You know, it kind of reminds me of what Stephen King says about writing. And just like that, we're going to learn about good arguments by looking at some really bad ones. By taking apart these faulty arguments, we can see exactly how to build solid ones for ourselves.
All right, time for the really fun part. Let's get to the core of this whole investigation and meet our first three culprits.
So, our first suspect is the straw man. And this one is a true master of disguise. The way this fallacy works is by twisting what an opponent says into something they never, ever actually said. Okay, this is a classic textbook straw man in the wild. The theory of evolution doesn't say we evolved from the monkeys we see today. It says humans and other primates share a common ancestor way back when. See what's happening? This quote deliberately misrepresents the real idea to make it sound totally ridiculous and easy to just brush aside.
And that's the absolute key, right? A straw man argument doesn't bother fighting the real position. It builds this flimsy, twisted version, a man made of straw, and then it looks really tough when it knocks that down instead. And it works so well because it gives this illusion of a huge victory against an opponent that was never really there.
All right, let's move on to culprit number 2. This one is a master of emotional manipulation. It distracts you from whether a statement is actually true by getting you to focus on the good or bad things that might happen if it is true.
In this really famous line, the argument has nothing to do with evidence for or against God's existence. Not at all. Instead, it points to these potentially terrifying, chaotic consequences of a world without God, and that's supposed to make you think the original idea must be false.
This fallacy pretty much just says, hey, I really don't like the implications of that idea, so that idea must be wrong. It's such a powerful trick because it just completely bypasses the logical part of our brain and speaks directly to our hopes and our fears about what the future might look like.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This type of thinking is only a fallacy when we're talking about objective facts. You know, whether something is true or false. But when we're deciding on what to do, like making a new law or setting a policy, well then thinking about the consequences isn't a fallacy at all. In fact, it's the whole point.
And now for our final suspect of the day. This one uses the slippery, tricky nature of language itself as its main weapon. Did you catch the trick? It's a little verbal bait and switch. Notice how the word faith just magically shifts its meaning. It starts out meaning spiritual belief in a higher power, and then, poof, it's morphed into trusting in something risky.
And that is the absolute heart of equivocation. It's like a verbal sleight of hand. It hides a total leap in logic behind a word that seems like it's staying the same, but it's not. By using one word to mean two different things, a completely nonsensical argument can be sneakily disguised to sound like it makes perfect sense.
So, we've unmasked our three culprits. What's the big takeaway here? Why does it even matter to have this kind of logical detective's toolkit? So let's do a quick recap of what's in your new toolkit. First, you've got the straw man, where an argument gets twisted into a caricature. Then, you've got the argument from consequences, which plays on emotions about the future to distract from facts.
And finally, you can catch equivocation, that sneaky little word game. This isn't just about yelling fallacy. It's about seeing the flawed architecture behind a weak argument.
But here's the thing. As this great quote from Marvin Minsky reminds us, the goal is not to become some kind of logic robot. We don't speak by thinking about subject-verb agreement. Logic is a tool. It's something we use to check our own thinking and to make our ideas clearer to others. It's not a perfect blueprint of how our minds actually work.
And that is the real power here. It is not about winning every single debate or pointing out every little flaw you see. It's about being able to recognize when a conversation has just gone off the rails so we can step away from those pointless fights and focus on discussions that are actually meaningful and clear.
So, I'll leave you with that question. Now that you know what to look for, I promise you're going to start seeing them absolutely everywhere. Happy hunting.